Well, I'll admit it, Calvin's got a point here. Assignments that teach you how to hate to write? Deadlines? Rules? Grades? Mr. Hauser and Mrs. McConnell breathing down your neck? Welcome to your first, but not your last, annotated bibliography assignment. This probably will not make you feel any better about the assignment, but I will share my geriatric perspective. I made it through high school, college, and graduate school not only before there was any internet, but even before personal computers had showed up to make it easy to copy, paste, insert, or delete. High tech meant an electric typewriter. Research meant using that library card, plowing through card catalogs and guides to periodicals, looking for useful research materials, and yes, making research notes on little 3x5 note cards. So at least we're not making you do that. As I said, it could be worse. So I'll cut through the big words from this Cornell University Library website. An annotated bibliography is really just little note cards made in a computer file. In it you keep a record of the sources you've examined, what they say, why what they say relates to your topic, why you should pay any attention to the person who wrote this book or article, and you also want to use the annotated bibliography to start compiling relevant or intriguing pieces of evidence that you will use to support your main points. Remember that the purpose of the individual research report is to find out what authoritative sources have said about one aspect of the larger question your group is exploring. To compile a useful research report and on the real deal to earn a respectable score on your IRR, you will want to include references to at least 8 solid sources. And you will need to describe not only what these sources concluded, but what kind of evidence they gathered to reach and support that conclusion. Again, the annotated bibliography is where you start compiling that information. But let's be honest about our motives here. Part of what Mr. Hauser and I are trying to teach is how to break down a big assignment into little chunks so that you don't find yourself scrambling to research and write a paper the night before it's due. Even if that's been a successful homework strategy for you in the past, it's not going to work here. You can easily thwart our educational purpose, however, and some of you probably will, at least the first time you tackle an annotated bibliography. I probably shouldn't say this, but it's really not that hard to dig up 4 relevant-sounding sources, make up a plausible-sounding summary, copy and paste a few random pieces of evidence into your document, and patch the whole thing together the night before it's due. You may not even get a terrible grade, although I'll do my best to spy these shortcuts. But the real problem with this strategy for getting through the annotated bibliography assignment with minimal time and effort is that whatever time and effort you do put in is going to be wasted. A half-assed annotated bibliography, won't be much or any help when you really do have to write the paper, and you will have to write the paper. So check out this cartoon and consider that irritating lecture about good study habits has been delivered, okay? It is worth the time and effort to take good research notes now because it will save you time, effort, and panic at the end. So you have a handout that explains this assignment, but I'm going to go over it briefly. The first part of the assignment is to create 4 annotated bibliography entries on 4 sources. 2 of your sources must be scholarly, that is, from peer-reviewed academic journals or a scholarly book. 1 source must be a book, and yes, you can double count a book and a scholarly source. Good journalistic sources are fine, but general-purpose websites such as Wikipedia or History.com will not count. As a rule of thumb, the first websites that Google kicks up are very likely not good sources for an annotated bibliography. But they're often places where you will find good sources, or I should say leads to good sources. We talk about mining them for sources. I love Wikipedia and I use it all the time, but I would not cite it in a research paper. So again, these elements of the assignment are all explained in your assignment sheet, but let me make a few comments about each part. The first requirement should be obvious, but please make sure that your lens or research category isn't turning out to be identical to what others in your group are pursuing. I've said this already, but talk to each other. Take a look at what each other member of your group is doing on Google Drive. Since you'll be writing a history paper, we recommend that you use the Chicago citation style that most historians prefer. We have a short video up on Moodle that describes how to put sources into this form, and Mr. Hauser is going to go over it with you as well. Trust me, computers have made this so much easier than back in the Triassic era when I was writing my master's thesis. Up on Moodle, you'll also find a sample annotated bibliography from a Performance Task 2 paper written by an AP Seminar survivor, who, by the way, got a very high score in AP Seminar. I've posted it with his permission, so here is Gabe's first source, which will give you a sense of proper citation format. The source summary is the heart of your annotated bibliography, and it has to be written in your own words. Don't just copy and paste the introductory paragraph or the abstract. You'll be submitting your annotated bibliographies to Turnitin.com, and that usually catches copy and paste jobs. Basically, we're looking for a solid paragraph or two, and more specifically, we're looking for the kind of information that actually moves your paper and your group's project forward. So, how does this source contribute to your understanding and potential resolution of the historical question that you're researching? Which claims does it primarily support? Remember, too, that you want to be especially alert to disagreements among historians. Showing that you've explored different perspectives is a key element in the College Board rubric. Many of the articles we put in your Moodle research folders are long and difficult. By all means, skim. But do try to get a basic notion of the author's thesis and where the author comes down on your group's research question. So you're probably not going to be able to read this slide, but here's a summary from Gabe's annotated bibliography. Again, the whole annotated bibliography and his final paper is up on Moodle as an example, and again, with his permission. So what is your source's background? Credibility. Why should we believe anything he or she says? Now, I'll give you a warning here. Lots of students like to write down that Professor Spock earned his undergraduate degree at Vulcan University, and then they neglect to mention that he's now chairman of the Department of Space Engineering at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Undergraduate credentials aren't usually very meaningful as a credential. Academic positions are very meaningful. And if your source is a journalist, note this: it's okay to write that Mr. Sulu is a science reporter for the Engineering Times. Here's an example of source credibility section from Gabe's annotated bibliography. The biggest mistake that students make with the evidence requirement, and more importantly in their papers, is that they simply quote a source's conclusions. What you want in your annotated bibliography is some of the evidence that the source cites to explain how she or he reached that conclusion. Does the source cite an example? Recount an anecdote. That's especially good for history. Present data. Include an image, a chart, or a map. Remember, you are going to need strong visuals for your oral presentation, so start collecting them now. Again, this will be a little hard to read, but here is some evidence from Gabe's annotated bibliography. Art historians, you'll remember the Arnolfini portrait. A number of students, by the way, have written Performance Task 2 papers on subjects related to art history. It, of course, warms my heart. For the second half of the assignment, you will write up 4 more sources, but you will also add a section that directly explores disagreements among your sources. Specifically, you will identify 2 fights or points on which 2 of your sources disagree or at least qualify one another. And by the way, don't use the term fight in your papers. We rather like our Find the Fight slogan, but save it for class discussion. The College Board talks about, quote, putting sources into conversation, unquote, with each other. They don't particularly like the thought of blood on the floor. So we've posted this rubric for the first and second annotated bibliographies on Moodle, but note the focus on summaries in your own words, a strong connection to your research question and thesis, high-quality sources, solid evidence, and good writing conventions. Proofread. If your annotated bibliography has a bunch of little red squiggly lines, find and fix whatever the Microsoft gremlins have caught. Even though you don't have to find a fight until the second annotated bibliography, I recommend that you think about source disagreements from the very beginning. You might want to create a separate Find the Fight document file to take notes on ways your sources contradict or qualify each other. Again, this is going to save you time and trouble in the long run. Here's the added rubric line for the second annotated bibliography. Note that the Find the Fight section is worth a lot of points. Okay, I'll let Calvin have the last word, but please prove him wrong.